Links to previous episodes are given in the video description, so don't forget to like, subscribe and share the video. Silent Paths, Wild Hearts. Episode 9. Chapter 58a. Gonzalo turned to Alpha Helios. I heard all of it, but even with them giving me access to the medical records, I was struggling to process anything other than the sound of his voice. Even though it was cold and emotionless, I'd never thought I'd hear it again. It was the same reaction I'd had to hearing his voice earlier tonight when he yelled and laughed happily at Gametheo over the food. No, I think that's all. It's pretty close to dawn. Your half of the wing is protected, but we keep windows fairly open, so I recommend not wandering too much during the daylight. You should head back to your rooms. If you have any questions for us, please don't hesitate to reach out. Gametheo will provide you with his phone numbers so that you can reach out to us if you need anything during the daylight hours. Have a good rest. I nodded and everyone got up and began exiting. Gonzalo, could I have a word? I said nervously. He froze for a moment. He looked at me, his eyes cold, and said, unless it's related to the mission at hand. No. I don't have any reason to speak with you. He pushed past me and left the room. I was going to go after him when I noticed Luna Natalia hanging back to make sure he made it out, a scowl on her face. I resisted the urge to roll my eyes. I was not a threat to him. I went back to my room. Adrian was waiting there for me. So what's the verdict? Are they letting you stay? He asked. I had told him earlier about everything that happened between Gonzalo and I. He was totally on board with my plan. In fact, I had to fight him into promising not to get involved. I had seen and heard from him how much he liked being friends with Gonzalo. I didn't want him alienated again for being associated with me. I can stay, but I have a feeling I'm going to be tested before being allowed anywhere near the labs. And Gonzalo? He asked. He made it clear I'm not to speak with him unless it's part of the mission. I sighed before I dumped myself on my bed. And will you? He smirked knowingly. I grinned. I won't make the same mistake twice. I'm not letting him go again. Atta girl. I'm heading to bed. Kisses. He said as he left the room. I locked my door, set my alarm, put on my ring and went to sleep. I woke up to a pounding on my door and I was immediately on alert. I opened the door with my knife in hand. Relax, Snow White. We're safe here. He said as he strolled in. You know I hate the nickname, I said as I sat back on the bed. It was only 3 p.m. Much too early for us to be able to leave our wing. Why did you see the need to wake me up so early? I asked. Well, for one, we're in shifter territory. We'll be so alone if we keep normal sleeping schedules, so I've been waking up at this hour for the past month and hanging out with them. I've got a little safe route to the basement all plotted out with the help of Gonzalo. They keep all the rescued shifters down there and all the new vampires are there until Queen Carissa sends for them. And 2. We need to plan how you're going to win your poisoned apple back. Day. Adrian, I am not discussing any plan because there is no plan. I just want to get to know him again and see if we still have something. I half lied. Suddenly, a thought occurred to me. He doesn't have a mate or girlfriend, does he? No, but the full moon is only a few days away and they are having a celebration with a couple of packs getting together to see if they can find their mates. You have to get him before then," he explained. I frowned. I hadn't considered the fact that he was a werewolf now. Did I dare try to take the goddess gift from him and make him choose me? It didn't feel right. Maybe this isn't a good idea. Maybe I just need to give myself closure and let him be happy with his mate. Girl, no. You love him. I know you do. It doesn't take a genius to figure out that you haven't taken a beloved or a lover because of him. Now that you have told me what happened. You two were meant to be together. Maybe you'll be his mate. He wasn't a werewolf back then, Adrian. Which, by the way, do you know how that's possible? I've never heard of someone turning into a werewolf. I thought that was impossible. Oh, that's a whole other story, but the gist of it is, Alpha Helios is the moon goddess sibling, and when she gave him a wolf, she gave all of his warriors a wolf. This only happened like half a year ago though, so they are all fairly new to the werewolf shtick. I didn't even try to ask questions. Adrian was always a terrible storyteller. I just withdrew into myself. Was there a chance that I would be his mate? After 200 years, what were the chances that I found him again just after this huge transition in his life? But I've never heard of a vampire and werewolf being mated. Was it even possible? What would I do if Gonzalo did find his mate in a few days? I am not sure I could handle losing him again. Hey! Where did you go? Adrian asked, looking down at my hand. I follow his line of sight and my hand is shaking. I grab it and take a few deep breaths until I feel the tremors stop. He stood and grabbed me a cloth to wipe my nose. The nosebleeds were coming sooner than they used to. I don't know if I can survive losing him again, I tell him, but I won't get between him and his mate. I will try to get another chance with him, but if he finds his mate, I will walk away. I wiped the tear that fell from my eye. Don't give me that look. You know what it does to me, I say, and he chuckles. Let's go get your mind off of love and back on mission then. Let's go down to the basement and see how we can help. Training starts just after sundown. They set them up just for us, so dress to impress. I've talked up your fighting skills, so don't make me look bad. I chuckled at his words. I'll shower and change. Give me like 20 minutes. He nodded and left, and as I reached for my phone, I realized I was still wearing his ring. I took it off and put it back in its place before I went over to the bathroom. After my shower, I couldn't help but look at myself in the mirror. Would he like my new body? It was toned and strong, but there was no mistaking the scars I'd gotten during my missions. I grunted and left the bathroom. I was proud of my body. I've worked really hard over the last 150 years to make it a lethal weapon. I put some athletic gear on and a loser shirt over the sports bra. If Gonzalo found his mate, I would still need answers to what happened to me, so I needed to earn a spot in the team. I went over to knock on Adrian's door and he opened it almost immediately. I followed him down the wing and into an elevator. It stopped at the first floor and walked under the awning of the front staircase and through to the back. We passed a few windows that were covered with dark cloth. Gonzalo set them up for me when I told him what I wanted to do. He made sure no one removes them while we're here. He's a pretty stand-up guy. He winked at me and I rolled my eyes. I already knew he was. He was the most considerate man I've ever known. We walked past and came across an open door. Thankfully, it opened towards us, so we were able to just kick it shut. It would be a bigger issue if we needed to come back this way and found it open. We got to another door and he opened this one to find a staircase going down. There was a commotion as we reached the bottom. I can see a few shifters in their animal form and a few others are close to it. There are a few warriors trying to calm them down and then I see Gonzalo in the middle trying to calm down one of the shifters. I can see there's yellow fur already sprouting on his face and arms and a puma behind Gonzalo, ready to pounce. I don't hesitate. I gave a loud whistle, forcing everyone to look my way and let my power outwards. I chose my targets carefully. All of the rescued shifters begin to sit down on their back legs or with their legs crossed and put their hands on their knees, not breaking eye contact. I can feel the strain it's causing on my energy and I look at Gonzalo, who's looking at me curiously. I can only enthrall them for a little while. Can you please take care of the puma behind you? I will let them go one by one. You need to calm them down, I said with a slight lisp. I know what he can see. My eyes would be glowing red and my fangs would be down. He seemed surprised to see the puma behind him and I threw him a small smile as he headed over to him. Gonzalo POV. I heard her whistling and we all turned to stare at her. To my dismay, Cassie looked good. Her hair in a high ponytail and what looks like workout clothes on her long slender body. Her amethyst eyes turned red and then began to glow. Her fangs extend and I see the rescued shifter and one of my guys sit on their haunches, looking adoringly at her. I was amazed at how many she'd been able to enthrall at once and how powerful she looked. I am surprised to see the puma she mentioned sitting behind me, its tail wagging as he looked at her. I hadn't sensed him behind me. He shifts back, at her order, I'm assuming, and I begin to lead him to his room when I see him limp. He might still be in pain from something, so I turned around and started leading him to the medical side. Can you release that one? He's one of ours. I pointed to Isidro. She nods and I can see the strain on her face. Get behind a shifter and let her know when you're ready for her to release them. Lead them to their rooms and if they become agitated, be sure to give them the medicine Dr. Castle left to calm them down until they adjust. I instructed the other warriors. I turned to look at Adrian who was still just standing behind her. Grab a friend Adrian, you know the drill. He nods and moves away and towards the nearest shifter. That one needs to be restrained on one of the beds. He's the one that started this whole thing. There's something wrong with his eyes. We'll need drive west to take a look at him. I told him. Nat, I've got a limping shifter. Can you come take a look to see if it's healable? I mind link her. On my way. She answers. By the time I came back to the common area, there's only one left. I nod at her and she slumps as she releases the last one to me. She saved our life. You know she did. Thank her, Dario suggests. I grit my teeth knowing he's right. Thank you. I told her and looked away before she could respond and began to lead the shifter to his room. Which one, Nat links? I put the man in bed and he begins falling asleep almost instantly. That was the problem in the first days. These guys are still so weak. It only takes one episode for them to pass out. I head back out and Nat is waiting by the stairs, scowling at Kassia's back as she's talking to Adrian. Kassia sees me and looks like she wants to move towards me when Nat intervenes. Which one needs healing, Gonzalo? Can you take me to him? I smiled gratefully to her. This way, Luna, I said, and caught Kassia's disappointed look from the corner of my eye. I show her the shifter and linger around in a very cowardly way to avoid talking to Kassia. I am not ready and I don't want to listen to anything she has to say. The longer you put it off, the harder it will get. Celeste said we had to deal with it in order to be happy with our mate, Dario said. He was so patient with me. Sometimes I felt like he was given a bum deal. Having a good heart that was broken doesn't make you a bum deal. I am lucky to have been paired with someone who has empathy and a capacity to love as deeply as you. He assured me. I tried to chuckle, but it was a little choked. Stay out of my head, I teased. Now that's just petty, I'm kind of stuck, he barked at me with humor. Once Nat was able to fully heal the puma's leg, whose name was Tony, I asked him if he would like to go back to his room. I was relieved to see that Kassia wasn't there anymore. Tony apologized 10 times in the 2 minutes it took me to escort him back to his room. I felt bad for the guy, so I assured him I'd come down and eat supper with him later to assure him there were no hard feelings. I busied myself with work after that. Helos approved speeding up the rescue center, and after settling on a plan, I called Alpharet, who agreed to join us tomorrow for dinner to go over the plans and the Interpack full moon run details. It would be a good time to introduce Kassia to the Crescent Moon ranked members if Helos is satisfied with her fighting skills tonight. I went down to the basement again for supper when we brought down food for everyone. I didn't immediately see Tony and I went to look for him. He was in the closet, rocking back and forth. Hey, are you okay? I'm sorry. He kept saying over and over, and I worried that he had been there since I left him a few hours earlier. He's had flashbacks for years. He tried to escape when he first got taken. He injured a guard and they brutally punished him in front of us as a lesson. Since that night, he can be fine one moment, then it's like he is back in the middle of his punishment. He keeps flashing here when he finds himself outside the room. He thinks he's going to get punished for leaving his cage, so he crawls in there until someone comes back and snaps him out. I've been checking on him every hour so I can get him out of the closet. I've found him in there 3 times today. A man at the door said. What's your name? I asked him as I helped Tony out. Blake, sir. Call me Gonzalo. How are you feeling with all the changes? I am, struggling at night and when I wake up. It takes me a bit to remember I'm not still in the lab. Otherwise, not so bad. The white coats make us nervous. It's been a long time since a white coat meant something positive. I understood his point and made a mental note of speaking to the medical staff. That was an easy fix. Do you know what caused the trouble earlier? Sebastian, the tiger, got agitated when he tried to go up the stairs and was told he was not allowed up yet. He overreacted and shifted. Since we haven't been allowed to shift in years, it hurt him. He started screaming and that set everyone else off. I nodded. We're not keeping you locked up forever. We just need to make sure you are in better health physically and mentally before you can walk around without an escort. The council is also going to be looking to see if we can find your pack or family so we can get you home, so we have to make sure you don't run away and get hurt or hurt someone accidentally. I know. We all know, deep down. Most of us have been at that place for a long time though. Just have patience. We will assume we're going to get punished for anything we do for a while. It's been the only way we survived. We know. You're not the first we've rescued from labs. We raided 3 other labs before yours. His eyes widened at that. I know there were a couple of people that were already down here when we arrived, but I didn't know they were also rescued the same way we were. We'd walked out to the couches by now and I sat Tony down. Everyone but the medical staff and, I paused, thinking of the best way to identify everyone. I grinned as I addressed the room. Everyone but the medical staff, the Mexicans, and the Luna that are part of Guardian Moon were rescued from these labs before you. About half of them found their way back home after they got better and the other half decided to stay and help rescue more people being experimented on in other labs. You are not alone. We will help you get better. I had garnered the attention of all the shifters by now and they looked a lot more at ease after I finished. I grabbed some food for myself and Tony and we just tried to chat about small things that wouldn't overwhelm him. People started sitting around with food of their own and slowly started asking questions. Soon, Theo came down and sat with us, helping me answer everything getting thrown our way. We stayed there until it was time for training. I paused on the way out and called Dr. Castle to request that they wear something other than white coats. He was unsure at first, saying that he needed a way for his people to be identified as medical staff by the shifters so that they could better assist, but then paused and said he had an idea and to leave it with him. Finally, with nothing else to keep me away, I made my way to the training grounds. There were more people gathered than usual. I guess word had spread that we were testing the skills of the Queen's personal assassin. I made my way to Helos. I could feel her eyes on me like a physical touch. I knew eventually, I would have to talk to her, but I wasn't going to make it easy for her. Nothing I had to say to her would be something she would be happy to hear. Good job this afternoon. Nat said she walked downstairs for a bit and you had all the shifters engaged and calm, Helians mentioned. Just explaining how it worked and what we're doing. Nothing that we wouldn't have told them eventually. I shrugged. You should give yourself more credit. They already appeared to trust you and were comfortable with you, Nat said. You know that's no easy feat. As you wish, Luna, I winked at her. We laughed for a bit before I saw her approaching from the side. I cleared my throat and took my place next to my alpha. I told myself I wasn't hiding, I was simply being formal to someone that was not in my group of friends. I could feel Dario laughing at me in the back of my head. You're supposed to be on my side. I huffed at him. I am always on your side. Doesn't stop me from finding your logic funny. He laughed, his tail wagging in amusement. Adrian said you start us from the bottom up. Who do you want me to fight first, Alpha? While Kash's sweet and polite voice was close to what I remembered from 200 years ago, something in her eyes told me she was making an effort to be this polite. Adrian's derisive snort at her words and the glare she sent him confirmed my suspicions. I feel like starting you from the bottom would be a waste of time. Adrian has spoken a lot about you, so how about you start with one of our top warriors instead and work yourself up from there? Helios said as Marcus joined the group with Celeste. Hi Cassie. Nice to see you again. Celeste said. Kasia looked surprised at how friendly she was towards her but quickly recovered and smiled back. It was probably the first genuine smile I had seen on her and I hated the way it made my heart beat faster. Isidro. You're up, Helios instructed, and that had Dario laughing in the back of my head again. Isidro doubted her ability to fight due to her seizure and he was the only one that was enthralled earlier. He had the motivation to prove himself right now. Isidro walked into the middle of the ring and removed his shirt, flexing his muscles at her. I rolled my eyes and saw Kasia turn to Adrian and make a small gag noise, making Adrian laugh. He went in and whispered something to her and I saw anger flash through her eyes. She looked back at Isidro, no smile on her face anymore. I'm guessing Adrian told her what he'd said the night she arrived. She cracked her neck as she approached with her hands and started rolling her shoulders to loosen them up. The entire audience quieted down. On your go, Alpha. I heard her say, but her eyes never left Isidro. They were red now and Isidro was no longer flexing. I saw him visibly gulp at the creepy smile she gave him, her fangs elongated. In spite of my own anger towards Cassie, I smiled at her confidence. It looked good on her. Cassie had always been shy and delicate. I used to encourage her to be more assertive and to trust her skills and develop her gifts. She had told me about her ability to enthrall 2 to 3 people at once, but she had trouble sustaining it, so she never tried. It surprised me earlier today to see her do it to close to 10 people and sustain it for as long as she did. She certainly had changed since the last time I had seen her. The fight is basically a joke. I can see her playing with Isidro. Each time he got close enough to hit her, she moved at lightning speed and slapped him upside the head, making the other warriors laugh. Isidro went red with rage and embarrassment until he was breathing heavily and yelled, "Fight me, you!" In the blink of an eye, Kasia was in front of him. She turned around and hit him square on the nose with the back of her arm. Even from here, I can see the elbow connecting to the nose and the spurt of blood. She turned again, dropping to the floor and sweeping his legs from under him with her own, making him land on his back with a huff. She put her knee on his chest and her extended nails on his jugular. You will respect me. Call me asterisk again and I will tear your skin strip by strip until you do. She seethes at him. After a brief panicked nod from him, she gets up and smiles at Helios, her teeth still elongated, her irises red but her nails retracting. Who's next? The entire place is in silence until suddenly Danny whoops from behind us and the entire audience starts cheering at her. I'll go next. This is going to be fun, though please not the face. It's how I make my money, he said as he took off his shirt and approached while the rest laughed. Kasia looks at Helios, who smiles and nods. This is Daniel, Gamma of Crescent Moon. Kasia smiles and heads to Adrian. She removes her shirt and I can't help but stare at her toned abs and perky breasts in the sports bra. The subtle curves of her body are more noticeable without the shirt. If it wasn't for the fact that I was very aware of all the unmated males looking at her hungrily, I think I would be drooling. Instead, I looked at Adrian, trying to tell him to tell her to put her shirt back on with my scowl. Anutta. No disrespect, you're a pretty lady, but I'm a mated wolf and I would like to keep my balls. My mate may not be a warrior but she will cut them off if she sees me in a friendly fight with a woman in a bra, Danny said, backing away. Kasia freezes and I can't read the look on her face. Fine, but if I put it back on, so do you. No double standards or unfair advantages. My shirt is as restricting as yours, she smiles, and returns to Adrian to put on her shirt. I relax once she is clothed again, but can't help but feel annoyed that the lustful look isn't going away from the unmated wolves. I toss Danny's shirt back to him and he nods gratefully. I look back up into the ring and I make eye contact with Kasia, who once again has a look on her face I can't read. Danny stops in front of her and her eye contact breaks as she smiles at him and shakes his hand before they take a few steps back and wait for Helos to give the go-ahead. You can do the honors, Marcus. He's your gamma. Helos said. Marcus laughed and clapped his hands together. The noise quieted back down. Begin, he said. It was like watching a ballet dancer. I was entranced. She looked like she was born fighting. Her movements were graceful, fluid, Dario added unhelpfully. I ignored his commentary and continued to watch her match with Danny. Danny was a good warrior, he'd taught most of us, even if, as beta, I was stronger than him, he still could get the upper hand because of his experience. They fought for 25 minutes. Neither quite getting the upper hand for long. I could tell though, as the fight went on, that Danny was getting happier and Cassie looked to be having fun too. I had a sneaking suspicion that neither of them were throwing their full strength into the fight anymore and were instead trying to get it on technical proficiency and strategy. They had gained each other's respect for the other's skill quickly to try to win based on skill, not strength. Eventually, Cassie managed to get on Danny's back and they ended up on the floor. Cassie landed on the floor with Danny on top with his back on her front. She locked Danny's chest with her legs and his head to her arms and squeezed. Danny wasn't able to get out of her hold and he gracefully tapped out after 2 minutes, getting up and giving her and slapping her back. This woman is a warrior. Luna. I want to see her fight you. He said excitedly. No, how about we leave the Luna out of it tonight? She hasn't trained since halfway through her pregnancy. Let her get back into training before you sign her up for sparring with a trained assassin. Marcus said seriously, which made Celeste laugh at his protectiveness. I think we've seen enough for one day. That was impressive. I'm curious about how you'll do with someone of a higher rank, though I must say we are all trained by Danny, so I'd imagine it would be longer fights with the same outcome, Helos stated. How about we have a spar a day and would you be opposed to teaching us a few moves? I saw a few I hadn't seen before. Of course, Alpha. It would be my pleasure. I honestly have a few questions on a few of the moves you did that caught me off guard. When you have a minute, Gamma Daniel. She asked. Yeah. I saw a few too that I want to add to training. Come over tomorrow for lunch and we'll chat. I'll introduce you to my mate and son. Danny responded happily. Kasia bit her lip to keep from laughing and my eyes were drawn to the gesture. She's a vampire, Danny, or didn't you notice? Can't be out in the Arizona daylight in the middle of summer. Sebastian laughed, making Danny's face flush red. Right. Sorry. I forgot. I was just excited. Come over after supper time. Danny said as everyone laughed at him. Why don't you two take a break? Sebastian will start the evening training. You can rejoin after you've had a bit of a rest. Helios suggested. Actually, I was wondering if I could get a tour of the pack grounds? I haven't really had the chance and I don't want to go wandering around where I'm not supposed to. She said, her eyes shifting to me. Why don't Marcus and I show you around the patrols to Crescent Moon first instead? Celeste said, drawing her attention away from me. I sighed and slipped into the crowd gathering in the training ring for training as I heard her continue, if you're coming around tomorrow, we need to introduce you to the night patrols so they don't treat you as a potential threat when you try to cross our borders. I made quick eye contact and she winked at me. I looked at Helios. Did you tell her? I asked him. No, maybe she made conclusions after we told her what happened to her that night she arrived? Or maybe she talked to her while we were gone. He responded. She's pretty good, isn't she? Adrian's voice brought me out of my thoughts as he started warming up beside me. I frowned. I would have imagined that he would have stayed with her now that she was awake and she would have told him about me. Maybe I wasn't even worth that, I thought with a pang in my chest. Then why did she seem to want to talk to me so badly? To tell me not to tell him? Maybe she didn't want him getting word back to her beloved that she had encountered her previously human ex. Dario whimpered in the back of my head at my words and I sighed. Of course, he would take a shine to her. He had my memories but never actually experienced the heartbreak. Yet, she's okay. I answered him and didn't acknowledge the snort he let out as we partnered up on the side of the group. Kasha POV I sighed in defeat as I followed Luna Celeste and Alpha Marcus. I was beginning to see just how protective of Gonzalo everyone was. I had already tried to find a moment alone with him multiple times today and there was always someone in the way. If they only understood all I wanted to do was love him. The fact that he had such a support system warmed my heart, even if it annoyed me to no end. He was clearly loved here. A small part of me wished I could have had that when I had lost him. Alpha Marcus introduced me to his guards, then excused themselves and I took a moment to walk down the river bank for a bit. I needed to decide on what I would do. There were only a couple of days until the full moon. If Gonzalo found his mate, I would have to let him go. There was no going against the mate bond. Even as a vampire, we respected the gifts of the moon goddess. We were also technically children of the moon, even if we had fallen out of favor with her long ago when some king cursed her name long ago. So was it even worth trying to talk to him when he clearly didn't want to? I turned around and started walking towards the training grounds, remembering they wanted me to attend training. Maybe I would write him a letter asking him for forgiveness when I left. He's worth fighting for, the answer popped into my head right away. I felt a familiar pressure in the back of my head and I closed my eyes and centered myself until I felt the pressure recede. I made my way to the training grounds to see them all paired up and sparring. Sebastian was still leading the class and I made my way over to him. "Where do you want me?" I asked him. Why don't we take a walk around and try to see if you have any pointers for the warriors?" he said and I nodded at him. We walked over to the left side and I resisted the urge to roll my eyes. Gonzalo was all the way on the right, sparring with Adrian. I would play their games for now. My inner monologue voice was right. I would fight for him until there was no hope. I found I enjoyed observing the wolves sparring and helping them improve. I'd only ever gotten to train a few people before this, and it was always one-on-one. I could understand why the pack connection was strong among wolves. They did everything together. I think I was doing all right. Sometimes just telling them what part of their form was lacking was enough to see improvement right away. A few still seemed a little opposed to taking orders from me. I guessed they hadn't been to the training grounds early enough. I wasn't sure what was putting them off about me, being a woman or being a vampire. Either way, they usually ended up on the floor after I would step in for their sparring partner as I demonstrated how my suggestion would work. I could tell Sebastian was enjoying these particular warriors being taken down a peg or two, so I didn't bother to rein in my temper. I kept eyeing Gonzalo from the corner of my eye, trying not to drool once he took his shirt off. We got through half the sparring groups before, much to my chagrin, Sebastian called an end to the training. Can we talk about what training might look like for the next few weeks? I think you're the set of fresh eyes we need. I had been feeling we had plateaued, and I think we could learn a lot from you, Kasia, he asked me while I was distracted, trying to see where Gonzalo went. I turned my attention back to him when I heard him say my name. He smirked at me as he had followed my line of sight, but repeated his questions. I agreed and followed him to one of the first floor offices. We went over the current warrior rankings and we set up a schedule for me to do some one-on-one training with the top and lower ones. I noticed he included himself and Gamma Theo, but not any of the rest. When I asked him, he said that was for the rank members to decide after they saw me spar more. I noticed it was closed to 1 in the morning as we were getting near the end of the list. Are you guys always up this late? He shook his head. We switched our sleeping schedules when Adrian arrived. We go to sleep closer to 2 or 3 and start our day closer to noon so we can be available in case he needs anything. I raised an eyebrow. All of the ranked members switched their schedules for one vampire. He shrugged and went back to his list. He's nice. We enjoy his company. We started just wanting to keep an eye on him and he kind of grew on us. We keep normal hours if we have business in the morning, otherwise, it isn't really a big deal. I was happy with his response. I was glad Adrian, at least, was easily accepted here. We were wrapping up what he wanted me to work on with each warrior when the door opened and in walked Alpha Helios and Gonzalo. Great, you're here. Kasia and I have come up with a new training system while she's here. I want to go over it with you both. Gamma Sebastian looked at me. Theo and Adrian are down in the basement. They will take you to Evergreen. He's in the computer room since his mate works night shifts this week. He can get you set up to look over the medical reports. I took that as my dismissal and I snuck a last look at Gonzalo before I left the room. I accompanied Gamma Theo to this Evergreen. I was surprised at how young he looked, but I guess that made sense as well. He set me up on a computer and then, thankfully, or because he got tired of my questions, he set me up on a laptop for me to look through the files in my bedroom, not before he warned me about trying to use the internet as the laptop was closed off to anything but the server he made for the files. After some urging and whining from Adrian, he also provided one for him to help with the search. I went up to my room and ordered a regular laptop from Adrian's personal computer. If I was going to be here for a few months, I needed some way to entertain myself. I had nothing else to do tonight, so I sat myself down in the living room in our wing and began to plan how to best tackle the terabytes of information from the 5 labs that Guardian Moon had raided. I took some courses in medicine and brain chemistry 10 years ago when I got tested to understand what the doctors would tell me, so some of the terminology was familiar. Even so, I had to look up a lot of terms to start trying to make sense of it. "I'm sorry, Snow White, I can't tell the difference between you, and you," he said, throwing his hands up. I moved my head. "That's just the same word." "Exactly. It all sounds the same. Gibberish." He slumps back. I looked at the clock. It was close to 4 a.m. "Why don't you take a quick walk before going to bed? Say good night to your friends," I told him. It had been sweet for him to offer to help, but I knew I would likely be doing this on my own. "Yeah, okay. Don't go to bed before I'm back," he said, and I nodded as I got back to where I was. I sighed 20 minutes later. This was going much slower than I thought it would. I decided I would shower and wait for Adrian. I went to training the next day to find out that Alpha Helios and Gonzalo had agreed to the new training format. I sparred with Gamma Sebastian this time and he was thankfully not sour over the defeat. We spent the next few hours assessing people and then another few hours after the training to give a score from 1 to 20 and comparing notes on what they needed to improve. We would be spending a half hour each day training the bottom 5 in one-on-one training sessions with me and Gamma Sebastian. During normal training, I would be walking around correcting forms, and at the end of the month, we would spar with them and reassess their score to see who's improving and who would need one-on-one training. I felt almost happy a few days later with the way things were going here. Gamma Sebastian had been friendlier towards me than the rest, though that was likely a result of the training regime we were undergoing. Gamma Theo would come spend time with us while we assessed and trained. As I learned, he took over the training when Gamma Sebastian had meetings in the city. Alpha Helios and Luna Natalia were still fairly distant, though I enjoyed sparring with him. I will never tell anyone, but I did pass up a couple of shots where he left himself open, but I didn't know him well enough to know if he was one of those proud alphas that would take it as an insult if they were beaten. My instincts said no, but I wasn't about to risk my place in his team. Crescent Moon was relatively friendly, so I feel like Gonzalo hasn't told them anything about us. His anger was expected, but I don't remember Gonzalo being this stubborn before. I've tried at least 15 different times to get him to talk to me alone and it was beginning to feel like mission impossible. He was becoming very good at avoiding me. Tomorrow was the full moon and I was afraid he would find his mate. I walked around outside after spending a couple of hours reading through more medical documents. I was getting frustrated. Nothing in them seemed to say anything about seizures. I had spoken to Drive West and he had taken a few scans and blood samples to try to figure out what was wrong with me. I would hopefully hear something in the next week. I was sitting by a little cave by the river that I had found on my second night when I saw a reddish-brown wolf running along the river bank. The wind brought me the wolf's scent and I took a heady whiff of that wonderful smell that was solely Gonzalo. I couldn't help myself. The wind was blowing downwind of him and I knew I could be silent enough even for his enhanced hearing. I got up and followed him. I probably shouldn't have. I should give him his privacy, but I was desperate to talk to him and this would be one of my last chances. I kept myself hidden in the trees once he finally stopped running. He was on a cliff that led down to the river. He shifted and sat on the edge. I sat there watching him watch the river running, unsure of what he was doing. There was a strong wind and I was surrounded by his scent again. I inhaled it like a drug and it was then that I smelled the salt of his tears. My heart broke and I walked away. I was hurting him. I knew he had anger, but I hadn't realized the amount of pain behind that anger. I was close to the pack house when I heard a pain-filled howl. It happens almost every night since I've gotten here. Probably before then, Adrian said from the side. I almost jumped, not expecting him there. He smirked at me. Losing your touch? Just thinking. I said, not bothering to hide my shaking hand. Then something he said struck me. Since you got here? I asked. He nodded. Did he know who I was then? I asked. I never mentioned you by name. I just called you Snow White. Then I heard Helios say something about Sicily once in the kitchen. When they didn't know I was on the basement stairs. My heart sank even lower. Sicily. That was still me. I need to leave. This isn't working. I'm still only hurting him. I walked into the pack house with every intention of packing up and leaving. What? No, you can't. You said you'd wait to see if you're his mate. Adrian said, running after me. There's no way the moon goddess would pair me with someone I've hurt as much as I'm hurting him, Adrian. The kindest thing I can do for the man I love is to let him forget about me again. I told him as I ran up the stairs. I walked into the room and headed for the closet. Adrian pushed past me and stood in front of the door. Get out of the way, Adrian, I said through gritted teeth. I could feel the shaking in my hand increase and my headache starting. Cassie, please. You can't leave. The sunrise is only a couple of hours away. Where are you going to go? Who do you know on this side of the world? See this through, if he finds his mate, I will follow you anywhere you want. If he doesn't, keep going with your plan to talk to him. You deserve closure and you deserve answers. Wait until we raid the lab in Glasgow, he pleaded. Adrian, I sobbed, I broke him. I sat on the bed and held my hand, trying to stop the seizure from coming. I closed my eyes and tried to breathe. The pressure in my head started to recede but the tears still flowed. He's not the only broken one, Cassie. You need him. He said softly, wiping my nose. There was blood on his fingers. He sat down next to me and hugged me. I let my tears flow. He laid us down on the bed and let me fall asleep in his arms. Helios POV. I was standing by the balcony waiting for Nat to come to bed when I saw Kasia walking out of the forest. Her face was hidden in the shadows and her shoulders were dropped in defeat. As she got near the back door, a familiar pain-filled howl filled the air. I got distracted trying to find him and didn't see her run inside. I sighed. I didn't know how to help Gonzalo. He had told us what happened in Sicily, but he still just seemed unwilling to talk about it after, despite my pushing. He's been avoiding Kasia, and as much as I understood his reasons, I didn't think it was healthy. He needed to talk to her. I looked up at the dark sky. Tomorrow was the full moon. Celeste had told him he would find his mate soon. This might all be over tomorrow, or things could just get more complicated if he found her and Kasia tried to step between them. If he didn't talk things out, I would need to step in. I didn't want to do that to my friend. I smiled as I felt sparks bloom from my waist as Natalia wrapped her arms around me. I looked back at her beautiful smiling face. "Penny for your thoughts?" she asked. I sighed and looked out at the forest as I saw Dario running towards the pack house. "I'm worried about him," I told her. "He has so much pain. He needs to talk to her," she said, and that made me look at her again. She had been all for helping him avoid her. "What made you change your mind?" I asked her. She walked inside and sat on the bed. "I was in the kitchen when she burst into the pack house a little while ago. She was arguing with Adrian." She sighed. "She actually loves him, Helios. She is leaving because she thinks she is hurting him. I think there's more to the story than what Gonzalo is aware of." I closed the balcony door and stripped down to my boxers. "Yeah, I'm beginning to see that. Have you noticed she doesn't have a beloved mark? Gonzalo said she was marked the night he went to find her. She has never mentioned a male in her life and neither has Adrian. She also claims to be close to her sister, and yet she never mentions her. I've had Evergreen look around and he can't find any record of a mention of Queen Carissa's sister. It's like she's been wiped from existence." "I think you're right. There's more to this story than what we know, but Gonzalo refuses to talk to her." "What if we talk to her?" she asked me, and again I was surprised. At the look on my face she explained, "She's in pain, Gonzalo." I could hear it in her voice. I recognized it. "You and I both know Gonzalo still loves her, or he wouldn't feel her supposed betrayal so deeply after all this time." I gathered her in my arms and we settled down to sleep. "Let's wait until after the full moon. If he doesn't find his mate, we'll try to get him to talk to her." I woke up early the next day. I was tired, but I couldn't sleep. I needed to know if Kasia had left. I grabbed my tablet and went up to her door. I sent a quick email and sighed in relief when I heard a small ping notification come from her phone. She was the key to getting Gonzalo back to normal. I was sure of it. I went downstairs and visited the shifters. Gonzalo was already there, with a goofy grin on his face. "What's got you in such a good mood today?" I asked him. "I asked Dr. Castle if he could change the white coats when he came over to make them more comfortable and he delivered," he explained, motioning me over to the med side of the basement. I chuckled when I saw what was making him smile. Dr. Castle and a couple of nurses were still wearing coats, but they had been tie-dyed with bright colors. "It looks good on them too," I said. "How are the rest of them? Any of them up for joining the festivities tonight?" "A couple. The 2 vampires are fine to attend as well as 4 of the shifters. The rest still need a bit more time, but they are getting there," he said as we walked up the stairs. "I'm headed over to training. You coming?" I asked him. He nodded and we headed over to Crescent Moon for the advanced training which was still being led by Marcus and Danny. I knew Natalia and Celeste would be busy all morning with the preparations for the full moon run tonight and we had already been warned to stay out of the way, so we had planned for a longer session. Halfway through the training, I sent a quick mind link to Nat. Gonzalo was taking a beating, he was so distracted. I knew it had to do with the full moon tonight. Helios, Nat needs me to help with the setup in the backyard. I gotta go, Gonzalo said, and I nodded at him. What's wrong with him? I've never seen him so distracted, Danny asked. I think it's the full moon tonight. He thinks this will be the one, I said, not wanting to discuss Gonzalo's private issues until he did. He's the last one. I can understand his frustration, Jillian said. Kara said something about it being soon. That's gotta add a layer of nerves to it, Marcus said. Yeah. Let's just hope he finds her tonight, I said. We returned to training and helped Nat with the final touches for the run while she went to change. Red and Kelly arrived promptly around 7 p.m. with their people. Marcus and Celeste came over with their pack shortly after. We were set up in the backyard. Long dinner tables, bright lights, and even a dance floor with light music to start. She set up a buffet-style dinner on each side of the gathering. Everyone is arriving. Where are you, mi amor? I linked her. I'm right behind you, she said, and I turned to see her walking towards me in a beautiful blue spaghetti summer dress that went down to mid-calf with white daisy flowers scattered on the skirt of the dress. You look beautiful, I told her, swirling her around and dragging her over to the dance floor. She laughed. Shouldn't we go greet the guests? She asked. Maybe after this dance, I said. The entire world fell away as we slow danced. I loved these moments with her. As the song ended, I heard a tiny shriek and I turned to see Belarus running towards us. I picked her up when she got to me, just as Marcus came running with Corey in his arms. Sorry, they kind of ganged up on me. They ran in different directions, he huffed. It's all right, Marcus. She's just asking for the next dance, I said as I twirled around, making her giggle. I'm going to go check how Kelly's doing. Find me later. Natalia smiled at me, her eyes twinkling. I nodded at her. Kelly was 2 months pregnant and they were supposed to find out the gender soon. I danced with little Belarus. I was sure I looked like crazy but it was making her laugh. I looked around for Nat while I walked back to Marcus when the song was over to find her staring at me with a smile on her face. I winked at her as I passed little Belarus over to Celeste. I looked at my watch. The moon would peak in a few hours. Red joined me as we headed towards our mates. How are the rescued shifters doing? He asked. Well, there's a couple from the last raid here tonight. We're making good progress on the plans you wanted. Let me know if I need to pull more from other projects if you need things faster, he said as he put his arms around his mate. I think we're okay. We should be able to get some of them out and into more permanent lodgings soon. Once we head abroad, though, I'm not sure what we'll find or how many we'll bring back. I'll pull a couple more people. I'd like to make sure you have the proper place set up to help them, he said. Thank you. All of the construction you've done for us has been appreciated, I told him. What you're doing to rescue all these people is more than amazing. I'm happy to do my part, he said. The rest of the night passed by quickly and before I knew it, it was a few minutes before the moon peaked. We made our way over to the platform we had set up. I was feeling nervous now. I could see Theo and Sebastian looking around for him. I saw him coming out of the pack house, looking up at the moon. He made his way over quickly and I could feel the tension rolling off him in waves. "Thank you for coming to Guardian Moon. We're happy to see our packs getting along so well. We are a blended pack, made up of everything from wolves, bears, pumas. Really, almost every kind of shifter and even a few warlocks that have found their mates within our pack," I said, motioning over to the mates of some of my warriors. I was thankful that they seemed to be finding their mates amongst species that lived almost as long as we could. Selene was really blessing us with people we wouldn't lose to old age. "I am thankful for how easily you have accepted my blended family and welcomed us into your life. Let this be the first of many full moon runs we do together." I finished, looking up at the moon. Any minute now, I thought, as Marcus laughed beside me. "What's so funny?" I asked him in a hushed whisper. "I can never seem to get the timing right either. I always end up getting interrupted. You appear to be the opposite." He laughed. I shook my head with a smile and looked out into the crowd. When I saw a few begin to sniff the air, I looked over at Gonzalo. He looked up at the moon and took a deep breath. His eyes went black and he started looking around. I saw his eyes lock onto someone and he froze. I followed his line of vision and almost cursed out loud. At the very back of the gathering were Adrian and Kasia. I saw one of my warriors, Elias, stop in front of Adrian and grab him by the shirt to kiss him. Adrian looked surprised and then completely wrapped himself around him. Kasia was just frozen in place, looking back at Gonzalo with wide eyes. "Men no," I heard Gonzalo growl. I looked over at him again. He was breathing hard and he looked to be fighting himself and his wolf. He looked over at Celeste. "Tell her she made a mistake, Celeste. She cannot be my mate." "Gonzalo, it doesn't work that way. You need to trust her," Celeste said quietly. "No. This was supposed to fix everything." "Fix me." He walked off the platform, shifting and shredding his clothing in the process. Theo made a move to go after him but Natalia held him back. "Give him time to process this," she told him, then looked at me. "Let's get the run over with so you can go find him later. He doesn't need an audience right now." I agreed and instructed the run to begin. I saw Kasia was still frozen on the spot. I couldn't read her face anymore. "Someone should stay with Kasia. I think Adrian is a little busy." "I'll stay. I have spent the most time with her," Sebastian said. I nodded and hoped Gonzalo would be okay. Kasia POV. I looked up at the moon as I saw people begin finding their mates. I looked around and found Gonzalo. He was looking at the crowd as well. Finally, his eyes locked on mine and I felt the tether snap in place like a physical thing. My heart soared, the impossible had happened. The moon goddess had granted me my deepest wish. Gonzalo was mine. I stood there looking at him, wondering if he would come to me like everyone else was doing to their mate. My heart sank when I saw him say something to Luna Celeste. His features were angry and in pain. He looked at me once more before he shifted and ran away. I felt the pressure in my head building but I couldn't move. He was going to reject the mate bond. The thought popped into my head. I felt a hand on my shoulder and I blinked. Cassie, are you okay? Sebastian asked. I looked around. Everyone was removing their clothes and shifting. They were going on their run. I looked for Adrian and found him against a tree, oblivious of everything but the man he was wrapped around. I think I remember the man calling him mate. Good for him. Someone should get a happy ending. I walked inside, Sebastian hot on my heels. Where are you going? Cassie, wait. I need to leave. I said, using my speed to go up to my room. I quickly began stuffing everything into the suitcase. Cassie, you can't leave. You're his mate, Sebastian said as he reached the door and took in the suitcase on the bed already half full. He is going to reject me, Sebastian. I don't belong here. I should have never stayed after I woke up. I swallowed a sob and kept packing. When I was done, I tried looking around to see what else I needed to grab. The ring and the letter. I went over to the drawer and took them out. Do I take them with me or leave them here? I had gotten my closure, even if it wasn't one I wanted. I should leave them here. Cassie, your nose and ears are bleeding and your hand is shaking. Is this the precursor to your seizures? Sebastian asked. I looked down at my hand. It was shaking violently. I nodded. Forgive me, he said, and I looked up in time for him to punch me right in the temple. Sebastian POV. Alpha, you need to come up to Cassie's room. I just punched the lights out of Gonzalo's mate. I mind-linked Helios as I put the unconscious vampire gently in her bed. What's Seb? He roared. She didn't give me much choice. She was packing her things and then she almost had a seizure. I knocked her out because she wasn't in the right state of mind to calm down on her own. I didn't know what else to do. I said defensively. Okay. I'll be right there, he said. I tried to mind-link Gonzalo but he had blocked it. I sighed as I removed the items gripped in her hands. A familiar handwriting caught my eye. I put the ring back in her nightstand drawer and read the worn letter against my better judgment. My eyes widened as I read. Cassie, I have to leave soon. I haven't seen you in days and I feel like I'm drowning without you. I love you. I don't care if you're the queen herself. I want you to leave with me. I can protect you. My friends will help us. I'll be waiting for you at our spot tomorrow after sunset. Please come talk to me. I will do anything to have you by my side. I love you. Gonzalo, I put the letter back in the drawer along with the ring. There were so many questions in my head. Why did she keep his letter if she took another? And really, if she had a beloved, why would the moon goddess mate her to Gonzalo? What was going on? Helios and Natalia rushed in with Theo. Not even 10 seconds later, Adrian rushed in at his vampire speed while trying to button his pants. He saw the bruising around her temple and pushed me against the wall, his arm on my throat. What did you do to her? He said, his eyes red and his teeth elongating. I lifted my hands up as Theo tried to pull him off me. I had to knock her out so she wouldn't have a seizure. She couldn't calm down on her own, I choked. It's okay, Corazon. He's just worried about his friend. I mind-linked Theo, who let him go but didn't move from behind him. Adrian moved his head for a moment before he let me down. Why did I never think of that? Knocking her out stops her brain from getting overwhelmed and cause the seizure. You're a genius, Sebastian, though I hate hurting her. He grabbed a cloth from the bathroom and came back to wipe the blood off her nose gently. What happened? Why did she get overwhelmed? Did Gonzalo find his mate? He asked, looking at everyone in the room. You don't know? Helos asked. Know what? He asked. Kasia is Gonzalo's mate. Kasia was upset because Gonzalo ran away after he figured it out, Nat explained. Adrian looked happy for a moment but quickly his eyes turned red again. Did he reject her? Not officially, but his reaction definitely indicated he might, Helos said. That's stubborn. I love Gonzalo, I really do. He's perfect for Cassie, but they need to talk and you haven't done anything to help. Cassie has been trying to talk to him all week and y'all just keep helping him avoid her. If they had talked things out by now, neither of them would be so miserable. He hissed at us. We all shifted around looking uncomfortably. We all knew we'd played our part in helping Gonzalo when he needed to avoid her. You have no clue what Gonzalo has been through because of her. We are allowed to be protective of our family. Helos countered, though the rest of us knew he was the only one that had really pushed him to talk to her. You're right, I have no clue what Gonzalo has been through, but you also have no clue what Cassie has been through, he said as he caressed her face gently. Helos was about to respond when we heard steps coming towards us. He stepped out of the room and cursed and he went out of sight of the door and then we heard arguing. Let me pass, Helos. Gonzalo's angry voice came through the door. Gonzalo, this isn't the time. No, I need this over with. I am leaving for a few weeks, so I need to reject Kasia and go get drunk in peace. Gonzalo, she's your mate. She's the other half of your soul. Helos tried to reason with him. Your sister made a mistake, Helos. Kasia has a beloved. Are you sure about that? I haven't seen a mark on her, Helos said. His back was back in view of the door. I am not her consolation prize. Let me do what I need to do, Gonzalo said as he pushed past and stopped when he took in the whole room. He was breathing hard and with a wild look in his eyes. In the entire time I've seen him, I'd never seen him look like this. His face changed to one of concern when he saw her unconscious with everyone standing around her. He took in her bruise and the cloth in Adrian's hand. What happened? You happened. You broke her heart. So she was going to have a seizure. Thankfully, Sebastian here had the good thought to knock her out before the seizure took hold, Adrian hissed. I don't think I've ever seen him angry at anyone before. I would much rather have happy Adrian back. You hit her. Gonzalo growled at me, taking a step towards me. I raised my hands, and Theo stood in front of me. I was just trying to help. Oh no, you don't get to do that macho man act now. This is your doing. If you hadn't been such a coward everything time she tried to talk to you, you could have been mating like bunnies right now if you had gotten over. I'd be mating like bunnies too if you hadn't pulled this tonight. Speaking of, Theo, can you mind link Elias? Tell him he can wait in his room once he's done with the party. I will find him. His thoughts were going all over the place as he talked. Theo nodded and his eyes glazed over. Stay out of my life, Adrian. You don't know. Gonzalo growled at his friend. Oh, I know more than you think. You're lucky I'm on a gag order from her or I would tell you exactly what you don't know. Get out. You will not break her heart again so soon. Adrian dismissed us. Gonzalo growled before he turned on his heel and pushed out of the room, Helios hot on his heels. I should have left with you when you got here, Adrian mumbled as he pulled the covers over Kasia. I followed everyone down to the beta floor where Helios was arguing with Gonzalo again. I pushed into the room. I almost wanted to laugh. Gonzalo was doing the same thing I'd caught Kasia doing. Gonzalo, enough of this. You're not going anywhere. Helios growled. Is that an order, Alpha? Gonzalo challenged as he dumped an armful of clothes into his suitcase. You know what? Yes. I've tried being patient with you. I have tried to get you to listen and you're too caught up in your grief to think clearly. I command you to stay within the background borders for the foreseeable future. I was surprised at Helios' response. He had never used his alpha command on any of us. He hated forcing his will on us. He always said he would rather talk things out. You would leave me trapped in this place with her? After what she did to me? Gonzalo yelled. I don't think you have the full story, and until you do, yes, and I command you not to reject her. You may think my sister made a mistake, but I don't. You need to sit down and talk to her before you ruin your life. I could feel Helios' alpha aura and command as he spoke. I have nothing to say to her. Gonzalo said stubbornly through gritted teeth as he tried to fight the command before he turned his head away, submitting. Then I guess you'll be spending a lot of time here. I won't talk to you like this. Figure you out. Calm down and come find me when you're ready to listen. I have some theories. Helios said as he left with Nat. This is my life. Not a theory. Gonzalo yelled as he threw his suitcase at the wall. He looked at me. What? Do you also want to tell me I need to give her a chance too? He growled. I shook my head. I can't tell you what to do, but I do think you're missing part of the picture and that might change your mind. Talk to her. Get the full picture before you reject her. Isn't that the exact same thing you advised Helios just last year? I said as I walked to where Theo was waiting for me just outside his room. I took his hand and walked back to Kasia's room. I knocked lightly. Adrian opened the door. Does she need anything? No. She will probably sleep for a few hours. I'll be here with her. He said and, for the first time, I noticed he looked tired. Didn't you find your mate tonight? Shouldn't you be with him? I asked. He sighed, he will either understand or he won't. I owe Cassie my life. I won't leave her when she needs me most. She's had enough of those in her life. I didn't know what he meant, but didn't ask. It was clear that there was a lot of information we were missing. Do you want us to watch over her and you can go see him? Theo asked. No. It needs to be me, but thank you. Just tell him I will look for him after I'm sure she's okay and please give him my phone number. Adrian asked. We nodded and headed up to our floor. I was happy Elias didn't seem upset. He said he understood and was proud his mate was so caring. We showered and laid in bed. I told him of the letter she had in her hand when I knocked her out. Why would she keep that if she got a beloved? Theo asked, his face making an adorable expression. I don't know, Corazon. I've talked to her the most outside of Adrian, not once did she mention a beloved. I hope Gonzalo can fix this. I don't like seeing him so broken, he said as he snuggled up to me. I kissed his forehead and agreed. I really hoped Selene knew what she was doing. Gonzalo POV trigger warning, talk of personal harm. I paced my room like a caged animal. Dario hadn't spoken to me since he ran us far away from her when we found out she was our mate and I was going to reject her. I lost a lot of my momentum when I saw Kasia unconscious, but it didn't matter. None of them know what happened. None of them seem to understand what she did to me. She broke me and now they want me to open myself up to be broken again. I spent the next 2 days in the room. It wasn't like Helios had ordered me to stay in here, but I didn't want to see her. Or them, for that matter. I couldn't. They were all asking too much of me. Dario was still silent. I only ever heard him whimper or growl whenever certain thoughts popped into my head. Nat and Helios have come to try to get me out a few times but I've ignored them. Mama Isabel had brought me food a few times, for which I was grateful. Theo didn't try to come up. He only linked me on occasion to double-check if I was okay. I'm not proud to say that I told him to shut up and was forever grateful that he still kept trying. I finally began to calm down on the 3rd day and then I was just not ready to face anyone. I felt shame and guilt at how I had treated the only family I've ever had. They would respect my decision if I just talked to Kasia. I know they would. They might, but if you reject our mate, I won't. Dario growled. Come on buddy, she doesn't even have a wolf. If we reject her, we can find a chosen mate with a wolf for you to run with. I tried to reason with him. She is the other half of our soul. Even if she doesn't have a wolf, she is my mate. I will accept no other. He said. I yelled out loud. You know what happened the last time I gave her my heart. I will not do it again. There was a knock on the door that interrupted whatever Dario was going to say. I stomped over to the door and opened it. To my surprise, Adrian stood there, his face a mixture of surprise and anger. I wasn't sure why he was here. His loyalties clearly lied with her. What? I growled. Don't be rude to me, I was coming here to see how you were, but, he looked around and noticed the empty room, I think you're clearly not fine considering you're fighting with your wolf. He hesitated, as if he wanted to say more, then shook his head. Cassie is leaving. Her flight leaves at 1:30 tonight. Sebastian and I are driving her. If you're going to reject her, I would do it before she leaves so it doesn't hurt your wolf. She's not going back to Italy. In fact, I am not sure anyone will ever see her again. What are you talking about? Where else would she be going? I frowned. That's none of your business. You refused her, he said, his eyes flashing red. You would too if you knew what she did to me, I growled. You don't know what I know. In fact, I think I know more than you do at this point. You have no idea everything she lost because of you. Everything she's been through," he said. "What are you talking about? She didn't lose anything. She's a princess," I said. "Yeah, I thought you'd say that. Like I said, you don't know about what happened to her since that night. It's a shame that you're so stubborn. You two were really perfect for each other and you'll both now be miserable because you refuse to fight for each other. What do you know about fighting for each other? I would have given my life for her. And yet, you won't even talk to her now. Really disappointing," he said as he left. "Go after mate or you'll never hear from me again," Dario said to me. I didn't respond. My mind and my heart were warring with each other. I needed to get out of here and think. I went out to the balcony and tried to shift. Nothing happened. I tried again and nothing. "What?" I said. "I won't let you run away again. You need to speak to mate," Dario said. "Are you kidding me? You're blackmailing me? I'm doing what's right. It's what you used to do," he accused. "My own wolf." I stomped back into the room and kicked the trash can into the far wall. I had no control right now. Rage and heartbreak fueled me. I felt betrayed by everyone, including the moon goddess. Why couldn't they see how this was killing me? She left me to die and took another within months. She didn't fight for me the way I fought for her. What kind of a soulmate was that? She left me and she was leaving me again. I grabbed the empty tray of food and threw it. It hit the dresser and the face of the top drawer fell. The small box that has haunted me for centuries fell to the ground. I went over to grab it and opened it. The band made out of spun wire stared back at me accusingly and I lost it. A noise left my throat as all my grief washed over me. I don't know how long I sat on the floor of my room crying. I got up and put on some running shorts and a shirt. Wolf or not, I needed to clear my head. I walked out of the pack house and began running towards the forest. I ran to the edge of the border and I turned around. There was no point in trying to cross it. Helos may not use his alpha command often, but it sure as was strong when he did. So I ran down the river's edge. I wish I could say that I used this time to reflect, but all I could see was her violet eyes telling me I needed to leave without her. After my legs felt like they were burning, I turned back and walked back to the pack house. I wasn't paying attention when I bumped into someone passing past the doors. I instantly put my arms around their shoulders to stabilize them and was shocked to feel sparks up and down my arms. I looked at the face attached to the slender shoulders and was met by Kasia's violet eyes. The sparks surprised me and felt so intensely wonderful that I couldn't initially let go of her shoulders. I saw her eyes widen and she gasped softly. I let her go and pushed past, trying not to let the sparks affect me. Dario fought against me, making my steps slow. He was pushing me to turn around and talk to her. "Gonzalo, please. Just give me a chance to explain," she said from behind me. Dario was pushing forward, making me stumble over my steps. "Please, Lalo. I love you." I pushed Dario back and slammed the block up as anger flooded me when I heard her use that name. "I am not your Lalo. That man you left to die in that forest is not me. That man is dead." You made sure of that. I seethed. I was going to go back to you. That night. My sister said you were dead. Please Gonzalo, I thought you were dead. I watched the tears flowing from her eyes. I heard her words but couldn't process them. It broke me, when they said you were dead. At least you had closure. I yelled, losing the last of my self-control. At least your part of the story with me was over. It took you what? A month or two to get over the dirty human and take a beloved. You know what happened to me? My friends found me, almost dead. Beaten, stabbed, and bitten. She reared back at my words, her eyes flashing red. It took me 3 months to be able to stand again after all the broken bones had healed, and you know what I did? I tried to find you. I went to find you. I thought you were in trouble for being caught with someone like me. I left my friends and went to save you. The surprise was on me though. I arrived the day you took your beloved. Her face turned from one of pain and sorrow to confusion. She opened her mouth to speak, but I stopped her. Have you any idea what that did to me? You were my world. I would have given my life to save yours. I would have even left Helos, who I'd served for over 1,500 years, if you asked me to run to the end of the world with you. To find out less than 6 months later you had taken a beloved. It destroyed me. Do you know what I did? You don't, do you? No one does. I went and threw myself off a cliff. I wanted it all to end. I wanted the pain to stop. I heard a few gasps and realized we had an audience. Now they knew. They knew the secret I had promised to take to the grave. I laughed ruefully, I couldn't even do that right. I hit some rock halfway down that broke my leg and arm. I crawled under some brush and waited to die, and I still couldn't even do that. You thought I was dead for 200 years. All I could see in my head was you, another man for 200 years. Trying to move on and never able to. Lalo, Akasha started. Don't call me that. Lalo, and any love he had for you died under that brush 200 years ago. My heart broke at the look of devastation in her eyes at those last words. I wanted to take them back, because I knew they were lies. I loved her now just as much as I loved her then. But I couldn't force the words out. It didn't matter anymore. What was one more broken piece of my heart? Dario growled and whimpered through the entire thing behind the block, trying to push forward until he didn't fight me anymore. My chest was hurting. I couldn't take a breath. I could barely see anything in front of me as I stumbled up to my room. Everything was moving. I collapsed and lost consciousness the moment the door closed behind me. I heard someone calling my name and felt a sting on my cheek. I growled and my eyes fluttered open. Theo's worried face turned to relief. Thanks. I thought you'd had a seizure like Cassie did, he said. I sat up and pulled a hand over my face. I don't actually know what happened. I've never passed out before. You were overwhelmed by grief. I knocked you out. Dario said before he retreated and blocked me out again. Are you okay? Physically, I mean. Theo asked. I nodded. Good. Helios, Evergreen, and Marcus are waiting for you downstairs. It's important. Come on. What's going on? I asked, getting up and following him. No clue. I was instructed to come and get you, he said as he walked in front of me. We passed by a mirror and I tried not to groan. We walked into the conference room. What's going on? I asked. Evergreen has been looking into some inconsistencies regarding Kasia, Marcus said. I don't want to know, I said, turning back around and heading for the door. Gonzalo, enough. You need to listen to this, Helos growled. I gritted my teeth and sat on the table. Helos nodded at Evergreen, who looked a little surprised at my response. Well, it took me a bit to gather all the pieces. I looked and there was no record in vampire history regarding Queen Carissa's sister and, trust me, I looked. That caught my attention. So I had to use other means of getting this information. What happened to Kasia? I was only able to find out about it through word of mouth. I put out a bunch of feelers out to some of my contacts online and I finally found everything that happened yesterday and spent most of today confirming the accounts. He pulls out his tablet. Around September or October of 1809, they said that Princess Kasia went on a rampage. The details as to why are unclear. She killed 4 to 7 guards, the number varies, and attempted to kill her father before she was apprehended. Then Vampire King Cassius was injured but alive. He sent her down to the dungeons to await trial. On December of that same year, Princess Kasia was stripped of her title and sentenced to death. Her name was banned from the vampire community. My contact wasn't sure what changed the king's mind or if he ever actually intended to put her to death, but her sentence was later commuted to life in the supernatural prison a month later. I took in a sharp breath. The supernatural prison was not a place anyone in their right minds would want to end up. It was called the Hell's Pocket for a reason. About 50 years later, when Queen Carissa ascended to the throne, Kasia was released into her service. She has been her personal assassin for the last 150 years. Rumor has it that Kasia has been kept busy. An estimated total of about 2,100 kills that are on the record are attributed to her, and that's only the ones that are known. Among them, the assassination of a rogue vampire group in Indonesia and another in Paris. She is the one that is sent when things are getting nasty or desperate. She's basically become a myth, a boogeyman, that no one is allowed to talk about in the presence of the royals. I sat there processing what Evergreen said. The dates are what stuck out to me. September 1809. That was the month everything happened. When I was beaten and left for dead. It was a date I couldn't forget even if I tried. That meant that when I went looking for her early the following year, she was already in Hell's Pocket. But I heard them say the princess had taken a beloved. I said, mostly to myself. Evergreen responded, unaware of what his information was doing to me. The only princess that took a beloved during that time was Princess Carissa in early 1810. It was a big deal at the time because they said that the intended was not who she had been originally matched to. There was a lot of speculation going around as the queen was matched and marked by Prince Armand within a month. My heart sank. I got it wrong. I got it all wrong. She fought for me. I was the one that gave up on her the moment I heard those words. I sat there with my head in my hands as my mind went around in circles until I heard the door open. Nat came in holding something in her hands. Kasia asked me to give this to you before she left. She handed me an envelope. I took them with a shaking hand. I recognized the handwriting on the envelope right away. I felt the tears flowing freely. I thought I knew what was in the envelope, but what I found was even worse. The ring fell out first, then I brought out the 2 letters. The first one was the one I wrote. It was worn yet carefully preserved. The second was a new letter and it only had a few words. I'm sorry. I'll always love you. Kasia. Dario howled inside my head and I wished I could do the same. Instead, I just stared at the letter. Where is she? I whispered to Nat. She left with Adrian and Sebastian almost 2 hours ago for the airport. I tried to get her to wait but she didn't listen, she said. I ran out of the room. I needed to get to her. I ran up to my room and changed. There was only one thought in my head. Get to Kasia. I couldn't lose her again. I needed to convince her to let me grovel for a chance. I felt Dario flow his strength into me and I could feel myself moving faster than I've ever moved. I dashed down the stairs and stopped when I reached the bottom step. Helios was standing at the door, arms crossed. Helios, I need to go. I pleaded to him. I rescind my command. Go get your mate. Take this, he said before he threw something at me. The object hit my chest but I managed to slap it clumsily to my leg before it fell to the floor. I looked down to see the keys to the Lamborghini. I heard Nat snort next to me, and I knew that there was a joke there, but I didn't have time for it. Thank you, I said as I ran out the door. The Lamborghini was already waiting for me outside. Open the gate. I instructed the guards at the gate. I drove. I knew I'd likely end up paying for a few tickets for Helios from photo radar as I passed through the town. Adrian had said her flight was at midnight. That was only an hour away. The only way I was going to make it in time was to make up some serious time. I was an hour and a half away, but midnight was only an hour away. I made it to the airport at 1:15. I ran to the giant board and I panicked. I didn't know where she was going. I ran to the nearest information desk. I need to know where Kasia Bianchi was flying and if that plane has left yet. I'm sorry, sir, I can't give out that information, she said. I growled. Do I need to call security, sir? She asked, picking up the service phone. I backed away. I grabbed at my hair in frustration and walked towards all of the gates. I suddenly smelled cogita and lavender but it was faint. Let me forward just enough, Dario offered. I couldn't let him forward all the way. His black eyes would expose our kind. We followed the smell across the airport. I heard her before I saw her. What do you mean my flight was switched to 4 p.m.? I booked it for midnight. I need the red-eye. You see this pasty skin, I can't fly in the day. I have XP. I'm deathly allergic to the sun. Fix it now. I sighed in relief as I saw her at a kiosk. Adrian and Sebastian were nowhere to be seen. I took a tentative step towards her. Cassie, I said softly. She stiffened but didn't turn around. I need that flight, please, she begged. Don't go, I said, my voice cracking. I'm sorry, miss. My system rebooted before I could correct your flight. That flight had already boarded and left a few minutes ago. If you need a red-eye flight due to medical conditions, we'll have to book you for 2 days from now. That's our next one to the Canadian territories. The employee informed her. Cassie, I just want to talk, I begged her, knowing full well she was within her rights to refuse me with the amount of times I've denied her this same wish. I will take any flight you have out of here, she said, and her words were like a dagger to the heart of my own making. I'd end things up so badly. I took another step forward and touched her arm. She gasped as she felt the sparks but didn't look at me. I just want to talk, I said, placing my wire ring in the palm of her hand. She had made it for me out of a pair of earrings she was wearing the day I'd given her the coral ring, saying if she had to wear something that tied her to me, I should do the same. She looked down at it and I heard the sob she tried to swallow. Miss, are you okay? The employee asked, looking at me warily. She simply nodded. I saw her other hand begin to shake as she tried to fist it to her side. I took it in my hand as I guided her to one of the waiting areas. I set her on my lap and started taking deep breaths, encouraging her to do the same while rubbing my hands up and down her arms. I don't know if the breathing exercise was working or if it was the mate bond at work, but the tremor in her hand began to slow. I'm sorry, I whispered as I put my forehead to her shoulder, I'm ready to listen. She started shaking again and I grabbed her hand and began to massage it, taking deep breaths until she followed suit and tried to calm herself. I took a corner of my shirt and wiped the blood from her nose. We sat there for goddess knows how many hours in silence. I didn't want to risk pushing her. Can we go somewhere and talk? I asked her softly. She looked away from me but nodded. I let her stand up and I grabbed her luggage bag. We walked over to Helios Lamborghini that I had parked in front of the terminal. I knew I had taken the risk of getting it towed, but I hoped that with the airport being relatively empty during the night, I would still find it there. I was relieved the moon goddess was on my side and the car was still there, although there was an officer writing a ticket. I put the luggage in the back seat and accepted the ticket while Kasia entered the vehicle. I climbed in after apologizing to the officer. Kasia was looking out the window. I took that as a sign that she wasn't ready to talk, so I simply began to drive home. Dario was pacing in the back of my head, uneasy with her silence as she kept staring out the window for the first hour of the drive. Say something, he growled at me. This isn't the right place to talk and we can't just pull over for too long. It's already 4 a.m. We can't risk her getting caught in the sunrise. I reminded him. He didn't respond and continued to pace in my head as I snuck glimpses at her to see if she would look at me. You should have just let me go. It would have been easier, she said, about half an hour away from the pack grounds. Join our Facebook and WhatsApp group for more updates, link is given in description. Rest audiobook will be continued in next episode.